Right now, Bill Gates is quietly buying up the dirt beneath our feet.
He really is.
Like, he has become the largest private farmland owner in the United States, acquiring hundreds of thousands of acres.
Yeah, it's staggering.
And meanwhile, out in the suburbs, thousands of new millionaires are being minted. And it's not by starting shiny tech companies in their garages.
Right.
They're doing it by buying boring local plumbing and HVAC businesses from retiring grandpas.
Literally buying plumbers.
Yeah. So today we're tearing up the conventional financial playbook for this deep dive because that old narrative, get a good job, save 10%, buy a house, and just sort of hope for the best, it's mathematically obsolete.
It completely is. It was designed for an economic environment that simply no longer exists.
Exactly.
I mean, it produces stability at best, but at worst, that old playbook produces a sort of quiet desperation. You're working harder every single year, earning a nominally higher salary.
We're stuck.
Right. When you look at your actual purchasing power, you are just treading water forever. The cost of living accelerates way faster than the standard path can accumulate wealth.
So true.
So if you want to actually break out of that cycle, you have to completely redefine your relationship with the word asset.
And that's exactly our mission today, because usually when someone hears the word asset, they think of a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
They think of what a CPA puts on a balance sheet at tax time. But if you look at how the ultra-wealthy actually operate, an asset isn't just a stock portfolio or like a piece of real estate. It's absolutely anything that grows in value, produces cash, or generates leverage over time. Period.
And that is the conceptual leap you have to make right at the start. If you only look at traditional financial statements, you are missing the most powerful wealth-building engines available to you.
Right.
You have to expand your definition to include things like your physiological state, your digital reach, and the exact skills you cultivate.
So we are going to walk you through 15 specific assets that actually build modern wealth today, moving from the foundation of who you are all the way up to how you pass wealth across generations.
That's a huge shift.
It really is. And I want to start right at the bedrock. Before we even talk about money, stock markets, or real estate, we have to talk about the machine that actually generates the initial capital.
The most important part.
Exactly. And that machine is you, your skills, and your health. Let's talk about high-income skills first. We all hear, learn to code or go into finance. But what actually makes a skill high income in today's environment?
Well, the basic math of wealth creation is unavoidable. Wealth requires capital to invest, right?
Right.
And capital comes from the gap between what you earn and what you spend.
Right.
So sustained, highly leveraged income comes from possessing rare, valuable skills that the market is willing to pay a disproportionate premium for.
Okay, so define that for right now.
Right now, a high-income skill is one that sits at the intersection of complex human behavior and measurable financial outcomes.
Give me an example of that, because if I'm an accountant, I might think I have a high-income skill, but let's be real, a language model can do my job in about 4 seconds now.
Exactly. Rote memorization and data processing are no longer high-income skills. They are commodities.
Wow. Commodities.
A true high-income skill is something highly immune to automation. We are talking about like high-stakes enterprise sales, where you are navigating the ego and politics of a corporate board to close a $10 million software deal.
Oh, I see. AI can't do that.
Right. We are talking about complex negotiation, team building, visionary capital allocation. You want skills that require deep human empathy, strategic judgment, and the ability to persuade.
Stuff you can't fake trust.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Those are the skills that command a premium because AI cannot replicate the trust required to execute them.
The compounding math on this is staggering when you actually map it out. Like, let's compare two people. Person A earns $50,000 a year. They're disciplined, they do everything the old playbook says, and they save 10% of their income. So they are investing $5,000 a year into the market.
Makes sense.
But then person B focuses heavily on high-income skills. They get into enterprise sales or high-level consulting, and they earn $300,000 a year. Because they have more margin, they save 20%. They're investing $60,000 a year.
So person B is injecting 12 times more fuel into the compounding engine right out of the gate.
Right. And if you assume a 10% annual return compounded over 30 years for both of them, person A ends up with roughly $1.8 million, which, hey, that's not bad.
Not bad at all.
A person B, they end up with approximately $10.8 million.
Wow.
That is an almost $9 million gap, purely because person B focused on upgrading their earning engine early on rather than just trying to penny pinch a $50 case salary.
But, the skills alone aren't enough. And this
No.
brings us to the second asset, which often gets completely ignored in financial discussions.
Oh, health.
Yes, your physical health. The data treats fitness as a literal, calculable financial strategy.
Wait, hold on. I'm going to push back here.
Go for it.
Because I know plenty of rich people who are completely out of shape, incredibly stressed, and practically living on fast food and adrenaline.
Sure.
So are you saying you can't build wealth if you aren't, like, at the gym every single day?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You can absolutely build wealth while neglecting your health, but you are basically running a marathon with a backpack full of rocks.
A backpack full of rocks. That's a good way to put it.
You are massively capping your potential and increasing your friction. Let's look at the data. There was a 13-year study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that tracked over 1.4 million Americans.
That's a massive study.
Huge. And the individuals in the top 1% of income lived, on average, 14.6 years longer than those in the bottom 1%.
14.6 years. That is an eternity.
It really is. But let's look at that through a purely financial lens, putting human empathy aside for just a second. In your final decade of life, your investment portfolio is at its absolute largest. The compounding curve is practically vertical at that point.
Oh, wow. Never thought about that.
Right. If you die 14 years early, you are cutting off the single most profitable decade of your compounding cycle.
That is mathematically brutal.
It is. But even before that, it comes down to daily operating capacity. Research actually shows that physically fit individuals are 44% more likely to be promoted.
Really?
Yeah, and active individuals earn 17% more than their sedentary peers, sitting in the exact same roles with the exact same education.
Why is that? I mean, is it just bias? Do people just, like healthy-looking people more?
Well, subconscious bias plays a role, certainly.
Right.
But the primary driver is cognitive load and energy management.
Memory management.
Yeah. If you are operating at 60% capacity because you are sleep deprived, your diet is causing systemic inflammation, and your cardiovascular system is weak, your brain chemically perceives challenge as a threat. When a massive, complex opportunity crosses your desk, a fatigued brain looks at it and says, that is too much work, it's too risky. It shuts it down to conserve energy.
So you literally pass up money because you're tired.
Exactly. But a highly oxygenated, healthy brain looks at that exact same complex opportunity and sees a puzzle. It sees a return.
I love looking at it as an operating system. Like, think about your smartphone.
Okay.
Your physical health is the literal hardware, the lithium-ion battery, and the motherboard. Your high-income skills, that's iOS or Android, it's the operating system.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. And all the investments, the real estate, the stocks we're about to talk about, those are just the apps.
Right.
You can have the most expensive, sophisticated financial apps in the world, but if your battery won't hold a charge and your operating system keeps crashing, those apps are completely useless.
It is the ultimate prerequisite. You have to optimize the hardware to run the wealth-building software.
Which brings up a really critical knowledge gap for you, the listener, to explore right now. If you look at your own career, you need to honestly ask yourself, what specific high-income skill do I possess that sits at the intersection of human behavior and money that is completely immune to AI?
That's the billion-dollar question.
Because if your entire job can be automated by a software update next Tuesday, you do not have an asset. You have a liability waiting to be liquidated.
That is the crucial pivot point. Because once you secure that foundation, once you have the rare skills and the physical energy to generate massive cash flow, you have to move to the next phase.
You have to scale.
Exactly. You cannot trade your hours for dollars forever. You need a vehicle that has no structural ceiling.
And that leads us to the ultimate wealth vehicle, the business upside. This is asset number 3, your own business and equity, and asset number 13, small business acquisitions.
Right.
Why is it so vital to move from being an employee to being an owner?
Well, because the employee-employer relationship contains a structural ceiling. You are trading your hours and your very best ideas for a fixed salary.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Right. So if you are exceptionally brilliant and you invent a new process that saves your company $5 million a year, what actually happens?
I mean, I get a 5% raise and maybe a plaque in the break room. Maybe a gift card to a steakhouse if I'm lucky.
Precisely. The employer captures the disproportionate upside of your brilliance. A business inverts that relationship entirely.
So you capture the upside.
Yes. When you own the equity, you capture it. If you build it correctly, you create a system that scales beyond your physical labor, and eventually it generates cash whether you are sitting at the desk or sleeping.
And the valuation multiples are where the real wealth is made, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you have a high-income skill and you earn $500,000 a year as a consultant, you make $500,000. But if you build a consulting firm that generates $500,000 a year in profit, you don't just have $500,000 in cash flow, you have an asset that you can sell to a private equity group for $2 to $5 million.
Yes, it's a life-changing liquidity event.
But here is where we need to shatter a massive myth.
Okay.
When we talk about owning a business, most people instantly imagine the garage grind.
Oh, the startup myth.
Right. They think of the Silicon Valley thing, maxing out credit cards, working 100-hour weeks for 3 years with zero revenue, just praying you find product market fit before you go bankrupt.
It's terrifying. It's exactly why most people stay in their safe corporate jobs.
Yeah, I would too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the truly wealthy often take a completely different, much lower risk path. Instead of starting from scratch, they simply buy existing cash flow.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is one of the most fascinating demographic shifts happening in the global economy right now. It's being called the silver tsunami.
The silver tsunami, yes.
According to the Small Business Administration, there are 33 million small businesses in the U.S. alone. And right now, 10,000 baby boomers are reaching retirement age every single day.
It's a massive wealth transfer just waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And a huge percentage of those boomers own profitable, incredibly boring, steady businesses.
Boring is good.
Boring is fantastic. We're talking about commercial landscaping companies, niche software tools, local plumbing services, HVAC companies, roofing contractors.
Not exactly glamorous.
No, but these businesses have been generating consistent cash flow for 3 decades. And the owners are just tired.
They want out.
Exactly. Their kids don't want to take over the family plumbing business. They want to be influencers or work in tech. The owner just wants to retire and play golf.
But wait, if I'm a 35-year-old mid-level manager, how do I buy a commercial landscaping business that profits $300,000 a year?
Right.
I mean, I don't have $1 million in cash sitting in my checking account to just hand to this retiring boomer.
You don't need $1 million in cash. And this is where the mechanics of small business acquisitions become incredibly powerful. The strategy often revolves around something called seller financing.
Break that down for me mechanically. How does that actually work?
Okay, let's use a hypothetical. You find Bob. Bob owns an HVAC business in Ohio that profits $200,000 a year after all expenses.
Okay, good for Bob.
Good for Bob. And Bob wants to sell it to you for $600,000, which is a very standard 3x multiple for a Main Street business.
Right.
In a seller financing arrangement, you don't go to Chase Bank to beg for a $600,000 loan. Bob himself acts as the bank.
Why would Bob do that? Why wouldn't he just demand the $600K up front from a private equity firm or something?
Well, 3 reasons. First, private equity usually doesn't look at businesses this small. It's simply not worth their time.
Okay.
Second, if Bob takes $600,000 in cash all at once, he gets absolutely crushed by capital gains taxes in a single year.
Oh, that makes sense. The tax hit would be brutal.
Exactly. And third, Bob cares about his legacy. He wants his employees to keep their jobs, and he trusts you to run it. So you and Bob sign an agreement.
Okay.
You might put down $50,000 or $100,000 that you saved up or raised from friends. And for the remaining $500,000, you agree to pay Bob a set amount every month for the next 5 to 7 years.
Wait, so I am paying Bob his purchase price using the profits that his own business is generating for me.
Precisely. You step in as CEO. The business profits $200,000. You pay Bob his $80,000 a year for the loan. You keep $120,000.
That's incredible.
In 5 years, Bob is completely paid off. You now own 100% of an asset, throwing off $200,000 a year in pure profit, and you didn't have to risk starting from scratch. You bought proven product market fit.
That is mind-blowing. Let's do the math on that hold.
Okay.
If I buy that business for $600K, pay Bob off, and hold it for 10 years total, and it just maintains that exact same $200K profit, like, it doesn't even grow. It generates $2 million in profit for me over that decade.
Just by maintaining it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I still own the business, which I can then sell to someone else for $600K or more.
That is the power of acquiring cash flow. The generational transfer of small business ownership happening over the next decade is the greatest wealth creation opportunity of our lifetime.
Wow.
Because the people who step in, acquire these old school businesses and digitize them, maybe you implement a modern CRM, automate the billing, use AI to route the service trucks more efficiently. You can double the profit margin without even adding new customers.
But again, this requires action and specific localized knowledge.
It does. It's not passive.
Right. So if you are listening to this and a light bulb just went off, your immediate knowledge gap to close is figuring out, how does seller financing structurally and legally work in my specific state or country?
Because the laws change everywhere.
Exactly. And what are the tax implications for the seller? Because if you can't articulate to Bob why this saves him money on his taxes, he's never going to sign the paperwork.
Exactly. You must understand the mechanics. Now, let's assume you've executed this. You optimize your health and skills, you bought a boring but highly profitable business, and suddenly you have a massive influx of cash.
A good problem to have.
A great problem. But the immediate urgent problem becomes, what do you do with that cash? If you leave it in a checking account, inflation will eat it alive.
Right. You need a fortress. You have to take that fragile paper cash and turn it into something indestructible.
Yeah.
And this brings us to tangible assets. We are talking about income-producing real estate, farmland, and alternative stores of value. We are taking the cash and putting it into the dirt, the bricks, and the vault.
The holy trinity of wealth preservation.
Let's start with the dirt. Why are billionaires so obsessed with farmland?
Because it is the ultimate finite asset. It is an asset rooted in physical, biological reality.
Right.
Let's look at the data from the INSER E8 Farmland Index, which tracked returns over a 33-year period.
Okay, what did it show?
Over those 3 decades, U.S. farmland averaged a 10.29% annual return.
Wait, that beats the historical average of the Dow Jones, which is incredible for, like, just a pile of dirt.
It does beat it. But the truly staggering metric isn't the upside. It is the floor. It is the downside protection.
How so?
In that exact same 33-year period, the absolute worst single year for farmland was a positive 2% return. It literally never went negative.
Are you serious? Never.
Never. The worst year for the Dow Jones in that same period, a catastrophic negative 41.3%, the floor on farmland simply does not collapse.
Why not? I mean, mechanically, why doesn't farmland crash like a tech stock?
Well, 2 reasons, supply and demand. On the supply side, they aren't making any more of it. In fact, due to urban sprawl and soil degradation, we are actually losing farmable acres every single day.
Right, so the supply is shrinking.
Exactly. And on the demand side, the global population is growing, and every single human being on Earth requires daily caloric intake to survive. It is inelastic demand.
You have to eat.
You have to eat. You can delay buying a new iPhone if the economy is bad. You cannot delay eating.
But, you know, if I'm a software engineer living in an apartment in Chicago, I can't exactly go buy a 400-acre cornfield in Nebraska and drive a John Deere tractor on the weekends.
No, probably not.
So how is a normal person supposed to access this asset?
The modern mechanism is through agricultural REITs or real estate investment trusts, as well as specialized fractional ownership platforms.
Okay, so like a fund.
Basically, a REIT is essentially a company that owns, operates, or finances income-producing real estate. When you buy a share of an ag REIT, you are buying a fractional slice of a massive portfolio of farms.
So I don't have to get my hands dirty.
Exactly. You don't manage the farmer, you don't buy the seeds, you don't fix the tractor. The REIT handles the operations, and they pass the lease income and the land appreciation directly to you in the form of dividends.
Okay, so we use the dirt to protect the cash. Now let's move to the bricks. Income-producing real estate.
A class.
I know people love to say, oh, being a landlord sucks. You get calls at 3 a.m. about broken toilets. But wealthy people universally own real estate. Why? What is the actual mechanical engine of real estate?
Real estate is the oldest wealth machine in the world because it operates on 5 simultaneous compounding levers. No other asset class allows you to pull 5 levers at once.
All right, let's walk through them mechanically. Lever 1, leverage.
Right. Leverage is the use of borrowed capital. If you want to buy $500,000 worth of Apple stock, you generally need $500,000 in cash.
Yep.
But if you want to buy a $500,000 apartment building, the bank will literally provide 80% of the money. You put down $100,000, but you get to keep the appreciation on the entire $500,000 asset.
Oh, that's huge.
It is. If the property goes up 10% in value, it gains $50,000. On your initial $100,000 investment, that is a 50% cash-on-cash return purely from leverage.
Wow. Okay, lever 2, tenant income.
The bank gave you the massive loan, right? But you aren't the one paying it back. You place tenants in the building. Their monthly rent checks cover the mortgage, the taxes, and the insurance.
So someone else is literally buying the asset for you month by month.
Exactly. They're paying off your debt.
Okay, lever 3, tax advantages. And I really want to drill down into this one because this is where the middle class gets crushed and the wealthy pull away.
Oh, absolutely. The tax code is a behavioral document. The government wants to provide housing, so they heavily incentivize private citizens to do it.
Makes sense.
The biggest advantage is depreciation. Even if your property is going up in market value, the IRS allows you to deduct a portion of the building's cost from your taxes every single year, claiming it is wearing out.
So it's a phantom expense.
Exactly. This phantom expense can wipe out the tax liability on your rental income. You are making cash, but legally telling the government you are operating at a loss.
And what happens when I want to sell it? Don't I get hit with a massive capital gains tax?
Not if you use the ultimate real estate loophole, the 1031 exchange.
Ah, heard of this.
Let's say you bought a duplex for $300,000, and 10 years later it's worth $800,000. If you just sell it, you owe massive taxes on that $500,000 profit.
Right.
But under Section 1031 of the tax code, if you take the proceeds from that sale and immediately reinvest them into a larger, more expensive property, say a $1.5 million apartment complex, you defer the capital gains tax entirely.
It's like playing Monopoly, where you trade 4 greenhouses for a red hotel, but you don't have to pay the banker any taxes on the trade.
That's a perfect way to put it.
You just keep rolling the untaxed equity up into bigger and bigger buildings until you die.
Exactly.
Which brings us to lever 4, inflation.
Yeah.
Most people are terrified of inflation. Real estate investors actually love it.
Why?
When inflation hits, the cost of everything goes up, including the rent you can charge your tenants. But your mortgage debt, it is locked in at a 30-year fixed rate.
Oh, so your income goes up, but your primary expense stays exactly the same.
Right, which means your profit margins actually expand during inflationary periods.
That is brilliant. And finally, lever 5, time. Yes, time. Every single month, the tenant pays down a tiny fraction of the principal balance on your mortgage loan. Even if the property never goes up in value, wait 30 years, and you suddenly own a multi-million-dollar asset free and clear, paid for by other people.
So you have the dirt and you have the bricks, but you also need the vault. This is Asset 12, alternative stores of value. We were talking about gold, Bitcoin, fine art, rare collectibles.
The vault, yes.
But I want to be very careful here because a lot of people treat Bitcoin or gold like a casino. They think it's a get-rich-quick scheme.
They really do.
But the real wealth operators don't look at it that way at all, do they? They view it purely as insurance.
To understand why you need this insurance, we have to look at the mechanics of a fiat system and the reality of currency debasement.
Break that down.
A fiat system means our money, the US dollar, the euro, the yen, is not backed by a physical commodity like gold. It has value simply by government decree, backed by the military and economic output of that nation.
Which means they can print as much of it as they want.
Precisely. And when a government faces massive debt or a financial crisis, the easiest political solution is always just to print more currency to pay the bills.
Right.
This is currency debasement. When you flood the system with trillions of new dollars, the value of the dollars sitting in your checking account gets diluted. It takes more of them to buy a loaf of bread or a gallon of gas.
That's awful.
You are losing purchasing power without the balance in your account ever changing.
It's a hidden tax on savings. And historically, this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's just math. Over a long enough timeline, every single fiat currency in human history has eventually debased to zero.
Which is exactly why alternative stores of value exist. Gold has a 5,000-year track record as money, purely because it requires intense physical labor to mine. A central bank cannot push a button and create 10 million ounces of gold.
It has physical scarcity.
Right. Bitcoin operates on the exact same monetary principle, but engineered for the digital age. It has a mathematically hard-coded supply cap of 21 million coins. It is decentralized, meaning no single CEO or government can change that rule.
So how much of a portfolio should actually go into the vault?
The standard practice among sophisticated wealth builders is allocating maybe 5 to 10% of their net worth here. You don't put everything into insurance.
I like to use a castle analogy to visualize this entire tangible asset strategy.
Oh, let's hear it.
Think of the business you own as the king inside the castle. The king is actively working, making decisions, giving orders, and generating the real economic engine of your life.
Okay.
The real estate and the farmland. Those are the thick, massive stone walls surrounding the courtyard. They protect the king's wealth. They are impenetrable, and they grow steadily taller over time.
I love this.
And the alternative assets, the gold and the Bitcoin, that is the moat surrounding the castle. It doesn't really produce anything, it just sits there. But it's pure insurance. It guarantees that even if the traditional banking system faces a catastrophic siege, The king in the castle cannot be overrun.
That maps perfectly to the mechanical risk profile of these assets. You build the engine, you build the walls, and you dig the moat.
Okay, so we've covered the heavy, physical, geographically bound assets. Dirt, bricks, metals. But now we are going to pivot completely.
A total 180.
Exactly. We are looking at the exact opposite end of the spectrum. We are talking about assets that weigh absolutely nothing. They have no physical form. They cost almost nothing to replicate, but they can reach the entire planet instantly.
This transition is where modern wealth separates from historical wealth. We are moving from physical constraint to infinite scale.
Right.
This encompasses Asset 7, intellectual property, Asset 8, digital assets and audience, Asset 9, reputation and network, and Asset 14, AI tools and automation. The unifying mechanical principle behind all of these is a concept called zero marginal cost.
Okay, break down zero marginal cost, because I think this is the most misunderstood concept in the digital economy.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
If you own a factory that makes physical wooden chairs, the first chair costs money to design. But the 100th chair also costs money. You have to buy more wood, pay for more labor, and pay to ship it. Your profit margin is always constrained by the cost to produce one additional unit, the marginal cost.
But the digital world breaks that law of physics.
Exactly. Intellectual property and digital assets have zero marginal cost. Think of software, a digital course, an ebook, or a patented algorithm.
Yeah.
It might cost you $100,000 and 6 months of intense labor to write the code for a new software application. But once it is finished, what is the cost to create the second copy? Or the millionth copy?
It's essentially zero, just the microscopic cost of server electricity.
Right. You do the work once, and you can sell it infinitely. Look at the estate of Elvis Presley. It still generates over $100 million a year from music recorded half a century ago.
That's crazy.
Or J.K. Rowling. She doesn't wake up every morning and rewrite the Harry Potter books. She wrote them once, and the intellectual property generates royalties in perpetuity.
But I'm going to push back here for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Every 19-year-old with a smartphone on TikTok wants to be a creator or sell a digital course. Isn't the space completely hopelessly oversaturated? If anyone can make an infinite digital product, doesn't the value of all digital products drop to zero?
That is the exact paradox. Because the bottleneck of production and distribution has been completely removed, a new, much more ruthless bottleneck has emerged. And that bottleneck is attention.
Attention.
The internet is utterly saturated with noise, but it is starving for signal. This is why Asset 8, digital audience, is so critical. You don't need 1 million followers to build immense wealth. You need what the technology theorist Kevin Kelly famously called 1,000 true fans.
I love the math behind the true fan concept. Explain the mechanics of that.
A true fan is not someone who passively clicks like on a photo. A true fan is someone who trusts your signal so deeply that they will buy almost anything you produce. If you cultivate an audience and filter it down to just 1,000 true fans, and you create enough value through software, consulting, books, exclusive content, that each fan spends $100 a year with you. That is $100,000 annual income. You own your own distribution channel. You are a sovereign media company.
And the connective tissue holding those fans together is Asset 9, your reputation and network. I feel like people treat reputation as a sort of soft, fluffy concept, like, oh, it's nice to be nice.
They do.
But in high-level wealth circles, reputation is treated as a hard, quantifiable asset.
Because it is the ultimate friction reducer in any transaction. In the highest echelons of business, massive deals do not happen on job boards or public bidding platforms.
Where do they happen?
They happen in private rooms because one person looks at another and says, I know the person who can execute this, and I stake my credibility on them. Yes. If you have a reputation for immaculate execution and supreme integrity, capital will aggressively seek you out. Conversely, if you cut a corner, break a contract, or treat a partner poorly, you are quite literally depreciating a multi-million-dollar financial asset.
Wow.
It takes a decade to build that asset and one bad emotional reaction to burn it to the ground.
And the ultimate leverage multiplier for all of these digital assets, the IP, the audience, the network, is Asset 14, AI tools and automation.
AI is changing everything.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs recently published a staggering report estimating that generative AI could automate the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs globally.
And the mistake most people make when they hear that is they think, how do I invest in this? Let me go buy some NVIDIA stock.
Right, everyone wants the stock.
Buying the stock is fine, but that's not the real asset play. The asset is not the AI itself. The asset is your ability to orchestrate the AI.
I view it like being the conductor of an orchestra. You don't need to know how to play the cello, the oboe, and the timpani perfectly. You just need to know what the symphony is supposed to sound like, and you direct the specialized instruments to play it.
Exactly. If you learn how to orchestrate these tools, you can turn an 8-hour administrative workday into 45 minutes of oversight.
That's wild.
You use AI to draft the contracts, analyze the data sets, write the marketing copy, and balance the spreadsheets. And here is the secret. You do not give those saved 7 hours back to your employer.
What do you do with them?
You use those 7 reclaimed hours to build your business, acquire your real estate, and build your digital assets.
The compounding advantage of that is almost dizzying. If I am operating a business using AI to do the work of 5 people, and my competitor is doing it the old analog way, I will obliterate them on margins and speed.
The wealth gap is going to expand exponentially based entirely on who integrates these tools as a multiplier and who passively waits to be replaced by them.
So let's look at where we are. You are running this highly efficient business, you have real estate, you have digital assets spinning off zero marginal cost cash.
Life is good.
Yeah, you are going to reach a point where you are generating more liquid cash than you have the physical time to actively manage. You can't be out there negotiating seller financing deals every single day.
No, you'd burn out.
Right, so you need a place to park your capital where it grows automatically.
You need a silent engine that works while you sleep. This brings us to the financial autopilots. We are looking at Asset 5, index funds and ETFs, Asset 6, dividend stocks, and at the extreme other end of the risk spectrum, Asset 10, private equity, and angel investing.
Let's start with the ultimate boring, reliable floor, index funds. I know finance bros on Twitter love to talk about stock picking and day trading.
Oh, they love it.
But the data on professional money managers is actually hilarious. Over any 15-year period, roughly 85% of active professional money managers, these are guys with Ivy League degrees, 80-hour work weeks, and armies of analysts, they actually underperform the simple, unmanaged S&P 500 index.
It is the ultimate humbling statistic in finance. It mathematically proves that for the overwhelming majority of people, trying to outsmart the market by picking individual winning stocks is a statistically doomed endeavor.
Break down the mechanics of an index fund. Why is it so much more effective than a smart guy in a suit picking stocks?
An index fund, like one tracking the S&P 500, is essentially a digital basket that automatically holds a tiny fraction of the 500 largest publicly traded companies in America.
Okay.
The secret sauce is a mechanism called market cap weighting. This means the bigger a company gets, the larger its share of the basket becomes. If a company invents something amazing and its stock skyrockets, the index fund automatically buys more of it.
And what happens if a company starts failing, like Blockbuster Video back in the day?
That is the beauty of it. As the company loses value, its share in the basket automatically shrinks. If it falls out of the top 500, it is ruthlessly and automatically kicked out of the fund, and the new 500th company is rotated in.
So no human emotion.
There is no human emotion involved. No fund manager holding on to a bad stock because of ego. It is a self-cleansing mechanism that guarantees you are always holding the most dominant companies in the economy.
And the historical results are bulletproof. If you had just blindly invested $10,000 into an S&P 500 index fund 30 years ago and lost your password, never looked at it once, it would be worth over $200,000 today.
It's incredible. And alongside index funds, you have Asset 6, dividend stocks. This is a slightly different mechanical engine.
How so?
A dividend stock is a share in a mature, usually highly stable company. Think Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, or massive utility companies. That chooses to take a portion of its quarterly profit and pay it out in cash directly to its shareholders.
So you literally get a cash deposit in your account just for holding the digital certificate of ownership.
Exactly. But the path to wealth with dividends is not taking that quarterly cash and spending it on a nice dinner. The magic is a process called DRE, Dividend Reinvestment Plan.
I like to use the snowball analogy for this. Most people try to build wealth like building a snowman. You are out in the yard, physically scooping up every single handful of snow, packing it tightly and stacking it. Your muscles are doing 100% of the work. That is saving money from your salary.
It's exhausting, and it has a physical limit.
Right. But a DRIP strategy is like packing a snowball and tossing it down a massive snowy hill.
Gravity takes over.
Exactly. The company pays you a dividend. You set your brokerage account to automatically use that $100 cash dividend to buy a few more shares of the stock. Next quarter, because you own more shares, your dividend payment is $105.
And that buys more shares.
That $105 automatically buys even more shares. The snowball gets wider, the surface area increases, and it picks up snow faster and faster. Over 20 or 30 years, gravity and momentum are doing the work, not your muscles. Eventually, that snowball is generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in passive cash flow every year.
So index funds and dividend DRPs are the reliable, boring floor. But I want to talk about the ceiling, asset 10, private equity and angel investing.
The big leagues.
The data shows that top-tier private equity has crushed the S&P 500 by a factor of 4x over the last 25 years.
But I want to inject a massive dose of skepticism here, because angel investing sounds to me like a fantastic way to take $50,000 and light it on fire in about 10 minutes because you gave it to a charismatic guy with a terrible app idea.
Your skepticism is entirely warranted. This asset class comes with a flashing neon warning label.
Seriously.
There's a running joke in Silicon Valley that the first $25 million you lose in venture capital is just the mandatory tuition cost to stop being a novice. It is incredibly risky.
So if it's that risky, why do the ultra-wealthy play the game? What is the mechanical incentive?
It comes down to the power law of returns. Let's define what angel investing actually is. It means writing a relatively small check, maybe $25,000 or $50,000 directly into a startup company when it is just two founders, a laptop, and an idea.
Right, you are getting in on the ground floor.
Exactly. You are buying a percentage of the company years before it is ever listed on the public stock market. Now, under the power law, if you make 10 angel investments of $25,000 each, statistically, 7 of those companies will go completely bankrupt.
7 out of 10. Gone.
You lose that money entirely. 2 of them might survive and return your original money. But that final one, that one might be the next Uber or Airbnb or Stripe.
Big unicorn.
Yes, that one company doesn't return 10%. It returns 100x or 1,000x your money. By the time those companies finally IPO and the average retail investor can buy them in an index fund, the most explosive growth phase is already over. The angel investors have extracted the massive multipliers.
But the real barrier here isn't just having the $25,000 check to write, is it? It's about access.
Precisely. If a brilliant founder from Stanford is building the next revolutionary AI startup, they do not need your $25,000. They have venture capitalists begging to give them millions.
To get into that deal, you have to leverage Asset 9, your network, and reputation. You have to provide value, mentorship, or connections that the founder desperately needs. Access is the true asset in private markets, not just capital.
Okay, let's zoom out. We have built an absolute fortress. We optimized our skills and health. We bought a cash-flowing business. We protected the profits with real estate and farmland. We scaled our reach with IP and digital audiences. And we automated the excess capital and index funds in private markets.
We covered it all.
We have essentially beaten the financial game of life.
You have.
But then, time runs out.
You die.
It is the one absolute certainty.
Which brings us to the most sobering yet critical part of this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
Section 6, the longest horizon. We are talking about Asset 15, your children's education and legacy.
This is huge.
And to be clear, if you skip this final asset, literally everything we just spent the last hour meticulously building will vanish into thin air.
The statistics surrounding generational wealth transfer are genuinely terrifying for anyone who has spent their life building an estate.
Tell me about it.
The Williams Group, an esteemed wealth consultancy, conducted a massive 20-year study tracking 3,200 ultra-wealthy families. The findings are a stark reality check. 70% of those families lose their wealth entirely by the end of the second generation.
That means the children of the founder squander it.
Yes, and it gets worse. By the third generation, the grandchildren, 90% of the families have lost everything. The wealth is completely wiped out. They are back to square one.
90% wipeout. When I first read that, I assumed it must be because of massive stock market crashes, terrible real estate investments, or aggressive taxation. But that's not what the data says at all, is it?
No. External market forces accounted for a tiny fraction of the failures.
Yeah.
According to the study, 60% of this staggering wealth destruction is due purely to breakdowns in family trust and communication.
Really?
The family members literally end up suing each other over the estate. Another 25% of the failure is simply because the heirs were completely unprepared.
So the money survived, but the wisdom didn't.
Exactly. Imagine taking a 25-year-old who has never had to budget for a grocery bill and suddenly handing them the keys to a complex portfolio of commercial real estate, a private business, and a massive dividend stock account.
A recipe for disaster.
They don't know how the engine works, so they dismantle the wealth-generating assets to buy depreciating liabilities. Yachts, cars, bad investments pitched by their friends.
This asset legacy isn't about setting up a 529 plan to pay for college tuition. It is about actively transferring the operating system of wealth. It is about teaching your children the mechanics of delayed gratification.
You have to teach them how to create value in the marketplace, not just how to aggressively consume. You have to let them experience friction, failure, and the consequences of bad financial decisions while the stakes are low.
And there is a massive macroeconomic tidal wave approaching regarding this exact issue. Cerulli Associates, a financial research firm, predicts what they are calling the Great Wealth Transfer.
The Great Wealth Transfer.
Over the next 2 decades, as the baby boomer generation passes away, an estimated $84 trillion will be transferred to their children and grandchildren.
And the tragic statistical implication of the Williams-Griggs study is that the vast majority of that $84 trillion will simply evaporate by the year 2070.
Poof, gone.
It will be rapidly consumed and funneled back to massive corporations because the receiving generation was meticulously trained by society on how to spend, but never taught the disciplines of how to invest and compound.
Which poses the most terrifying, profound question of this entire conversation for anyone listening. Knowledge gap number 3.
Okay.
If you are a parent listening to this right now, your ultimate challenge is this. How do you practically teach delayed gratification, deep focus, and the slow compounding of money to a child whose entire neurological system is being rewired by instant digital rewards?
It's incredibly hard.
How do you teach a teenager the value of a 10-year real estate hold when the algorithms on their phone are weaponized to deliver a dopamine spike every 15 seconds?
It is arguably the most difficult challenge on this entire list because you are fighting against the entire momentum of modern culture.
It really is. It requires intense, deliberate friction. Okay. Let's step back and pull all of this together. We've journeyed through 15 distinct, powerful assets, from the hardware of your own health to the acquisition of boring businesses, the fortress of farmland, the infinite scale of digital IP, the silent engines of index funds, and the profound responsibility of generational legacy.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. So what is the singular unifying principle here?
If you synthesize the mechanics of every single thing we have discussed, the unbreakable thread connecting all 15 assets is compounding.
Compounding.
And we must expand our view of that word. We don't just mean money compounding with an interest rate in a bank account. I mean the compounding of your high-income skills over decades of deliberate practice. The compounding of deep trust in your professional relationships and your reputation. The compounding of your physical health, which allows you to work sharper, sleep better, and live an extra decade to oversee your empire. The truly wealthy do not just invest money. They architect holistic systems that generate compounding returns across every single vector of their existence.
And here's the hard, unavoidable truth we have to face as we wrap this up. The wealth gap in our society is no longer an information gap.
It isn't.
30 years ago, maybe you genuinely didn't know how a 1031 real estate exchange worked, or how to access an index fund, or how to structure a seller-financed business acquisition. That information was guarded by Wall Street and country clubs.
Kept behind closed doors.
Exactly. But today, that information is completely democratized. It is literally sitting in your pocket, accessible for free. The gap between the financially stuck and the wealthy is now purely an action gap.
It is the vast, uncomfortable distance between knowing exactly what you should do and actually possessing the discipline to execute it in reality. Knowledge, unapplied, is just entertainment.
So here is the immediate challenge to you listening to this right now. Do not just let this be entertainment. Do not close this app, feel a warm rush of inspiration for 48 hours, and then return to the exact same routine on Monday morning, changing absolutely nothing.
You have to do something.
Look at the 15 assets we uncovered. Which 3 are you going to actively start building in the next 90 days? Maybe you need to start with the foundational hardware, optimizing your sleep and diet.
A great place to start.
Or maybe you need to open your first index fund and set up a $100 automated weekly transfer. Or maybe you need to start researching retiring baby boomers in your local town. Pick 3. Commit to the friction of action.
Because the compounding curve starts the moment you make the first deposit, whether that is capital, time, or physical effort.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own this week. We talked deeply about how the ultimate goal of acquiring these 15 assets is not to buy luxury goods. It is to buy back your time. It is to gain sovereignty over your own schedule. But if artificial intelligence is rapidly evolving to automate the bulk of our daily cognitive labor, if the technology is on the verge of granting the average person massive amounts of free time without them having to financially buy it, does the very definition of what makes someone wealthy completely change in the next decade?
That is a deep thought.
If time becomes abundant for everyone, are we about to value something entirely different than money? Think about that. We will see you on the next deep dive.